Okay, welcome back. So at this point, I just need to be able to step back once. I need to remember my history by one step and then be able to recover that history. So the first thing I'm going to do is repair my little split window thing going on here. So if you mouse over this horizontal divider, there at the bottom you're going to get this double arrow. If you double click that, I mean you can click it and kind of move it around. If you were to then drag it to the top, I believe maybe even drag it to the bottom, this split goes away. But you could also just, when you get the double arrows, just double click and it gets rid of the splitter. So useful for various reasons. You can also get to it from up here under window split. There's different ways to approach that. So if you want to cross-reference multiple spots. But at this point, let's just scroll all the way to the top of the core file. And I need a variable to track my history. So we've got the current, where we're currently sitting. We've got the next for the next request. Now I just need a previous variable, a previous heading. Where did I come from? That way I could potentially restore it. So right up here at the top, where I have my two serialized fields, I'm going to add one more serialized field. It's also going to be a string. And this will be called prev heading, as in previous heading. Well, now that I have the ability to store that information, now I need to actually store it. So if we scroll down or go looking for render story, where we're actually doing the updates of current heading and next heading, we can also, just as a heads up, right up here at the top, if you click on that third item, this is a listing of all the methods and variables and properties and whatnot that are inside this file. So you can go looking through a really large complex file for different items. So I said I'm specifically looking for render story. Well, that's it right there. So clicking that jumps me down to that spot of code. So at this point, the idea is current heading is where I'm currently at. So if I'm stepping forward, where I currently am right now, that is my history as soon as I make that step forward. So I want to hold on to current heading before it gets destroyed. Well, the act of setting it equal to next heading destroys whatever its current value is. I lose that information. So I need to preserve that just before that overwrite happens. So just above it, throw your cursor up there and hit enter to bring us in line with one more line. And we're going to say prev heading, previous heading, equals cur heading. So remember what the current heading is inside the previous heading and then update the current heading with whatever's inside next heading. Now, this allows us to hold on to that information. Now we need to actually use that information. So where are we handling all of our inputs? Well, that would be handle input. So down here, scrolling all the way down to the bottom, we're going to append a back handler to all of these other inputs. And again, we're going to sit just outside this outer loop, not on the inner stuff. We're going to drop down a line. We're going to now say else if input.getKeyDown. The key code that we're looking for is the X key. And this is straight out of the flowcharts, the documentation, that kind of stuff. So the rubric item that says, did you keep with the GDD, if you're using this implementation, it will work perfectly fine. So you'll get those points. Now, all we need to do is say, we want to go forward in time based on where we were in the past. So all of our forward in time stuff thus far has been dealing with this next heading. Well, our where we were is our previous heading. So all I need to do is say that my next heading, where I want to go, is where I was, where I came from, prev heading. That one step gives us the ability to jump around in the code, or rather jump around in the story and save. So at this point, I'd like to add just a little bit of flair, visual flair to my text. That way we can kind of see that it's a little bit different than all the rest. So I'm not going to do it for every one of these items. You're free to go in and make the changes however you see fit. But essentially, I want to call out just a couple of different things. So looking down through this list, if we get to this find a highway, that's the you live down here at the bottom. So I just want to throw a little bit of flair on there and say if you win, we'll render this you live in the color green. Well, the thing is, for whatever reason, the color green that Unity sees is not actually as green as you might think. It's not a full-blown 255 0. It's more of like an olive drab. It's more like a pea green kind of, like strained peas or whatever. So green beans, something like that. So I actually want to use the color lime. Well, if you go out to the documentation and you look up debug.log, it has information about what's called rich text. And this is essentially like the HTML formatting that you can add to your actual text here that gets rendered. Now it gets seen by both the console and by the UI. So this isn't something, as far as I'm aware, this isn't anywhere near as powerful as something like TextMesh Pro, but it is useful. It's pretty nice to be able to just throw a color in here and move on to the next feature. So the idea is we can add these formatting tags by just using diamonds, similar to the whole get component, diamond T. Instead of T, we actually place the actual value, the tag and the value that we want to call out to. So here for you live, I actually want to make that color, that text, the color lime. So to start a color tag, all you do is say start the diamond. Inside the diamond, we want color equals, and then whatever the word is. Now again, if you check the documentation for rich text, it will tell you could also add hexadecimal values in here. So if you had like the RGB channels that you see over in Unity, where you actually have 0 to F, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, A, B, C, D, E, F, those values, hexadecimal, base 16, you can punch those in. There's something like pound, couple of different channels, that's 10 and 10 right there. That's what the A is. But you also just have shortcuts like the word lime. So you can put that in to start coloring your text. Now to stop coloring your text, you go to wherever it is you want to stop, and I'm going to go right after that period, but before the end of my string, so before that double quote. And to turn off that tag, you throw another diamond in there, and then you use a / and then the name of the tag itself, color. Okay, diamond color equals lime diamond, and then diamond / color diamond. Now if you mess any of this up, you accidentally add spaces in here, you misspell any of these words, you'll see the actual words themselves printed out to your console and to your screen. If you see the colors, then you've done it correctly. So I want to do the same thing. So we're lime for the you live. Let's go with a red color for when you died down here for the inspect basement. So diamond color equals red, and go to the end just after the period but before the double quotes, add another diamond, and then / color to turn it off. Now sometimes you want to use these kinds of color tags to emphasize that these letters, maybe the square brackets you color one color, the letter in between it, maybe you color it a different color, but sometimes you just want that letter to maybe be bold or italicized or something like that. And again, double check the documentation for rich text. But there are a couple of other tags. So what I'm going to do, just to kind of emphasize this a little bit more, I'm going to do what I alluded to earlier. I'm going to add one more new line right here to the very first item, the wake up. And I'm going to drop it down by one more line. And I'm going to put the title where it says this is wake up in parentheses. I'm going to put that inside bold italics just to show you that it does pop in a certain way. So I want to start it right after I start my string. So there's the double quote, but before my parenthesis. And I want to do bold, so I have to do the tag, the diamond, and then B. And I said I also want to do italics. So right after the closing diamond, but before the parenthesis again, I want to do one more tag and add I for italics. Now, to turn these off, you have to use the exact same thing we did with color, diamond, / and then whatever the tag is, but you have to do it in reverse order if you use multiples. So in this case, because I started with B and then I went to I need to turn off I first, then turn off B. So start from one direction, end going the opposite direction. So I'm going to come over here to just after that parenthesis, but before the new line, before its backslash, because if I accidentally do something right here where the cursor's at between those two, that'll break the new line. And whatever character I add right after that might not be a valid escape sequence. So I might get some kind of a warning or an error telling me it doesn't understand what that escape sequence is, because there's only specific ones that are reserved. So after the parenthesis, but before the backslash, I'll throw in a diamond, and then I want to turn off I, because looking to the left, what's the first one I run into? That's an I. And then the second one I run into is a B. So right after the closing diamond, but before the backslash, throw in another diamond and call B. Save this file. Now when Unity finishes compiling, we shouldn't see any kind of warnings or errors. And now, if we start playing, you'll notice that the text you see here inside your game view, as well as the text down here in your console, respects those rich text formatting tags. And in this case, I accidentally screwed it up somehow, so I'm going to stop, jump back to my code, and take a look at what happened. I forgot the / on my ending tags. So that's exactly what I was talking about. We saw the error right there in the game. We also see it down here in the console. So I need to fix those closing tags. So / and / inside the two tags. Save your file again. And now we'll jump back to Unity. Let it compile. And then play. So now, this is wake up. We added that extra new line, so it breaks these two apart. So see, it's kind of a little easier on the eyes. And then we have bold and italics to just that top little section. Now we also see it down here in the, again, there's only 2 lines rendering here. If you wanted to see more, you could go up here to this, this stack right here, this little hamburger stack, and see where it says log entry. You could change the number here, but it's going to do that for every single line, so sometimes that gets a little unwieldy. 2 is usually perfectly fine. But then when you click on it, you can see all that extra text down here. So there's the bold italics, and then the extra text down there. So let's walk through this. Let's go win the game. So check the car, break the window, highway. You live. We see that it's lime down here. Okay, well how about the X key that we had, which implemented going back? Suddenly I'm back at break the window. So now, instead of checking out the highway, I can possibly switch over and check out the farmhouse. Now it's important to realize that this back implementation only remembers one node of history. So if I press back one more time, where I just came from is find a highway. So it's going to ping pong me back and forth between those two nodes. So back and forth, back and forth. So that's one limitation of this particular implementation. Again, there are other ways to approach it, but this will work out fine for the rubric and for the points and that kind of stuff. So don't sweat it on that front. This will work out perfectly fine. You could just as easily make X look at the current location, and then you could establish, just like we did with all of our other current heading, next heading stuff, you could make it go to a bunch of different locations. That's absolutely fine. Just play test it and make sure you're accurate with what you choose. So in this case, I'm going to deviate and jump over to the farmhouse. So check the farmhouse, pressing F. And from here, I could check the car. Well, we already handled all the car stuff, so I'm going to continue on into the farmhouse. So F to enter the farmhouse. Let's check out the phone. So try the phone. I don't want to deal with the farmhouse. Let's turn around and go back one just to see. Okay, it was still basement, so we can maybe directly go to the basement. And there we see the "you died" in red. So at this point, the game is completely functional based on all the different bits and pieces that we've added. So at this point, what I would want to do is, now that I'm fairly confident that this game is done, I mean, yes, you would want to go through and try to add those extra features that are listed on the rubric, stuff like play again, stuff like a welcome screen, etc. But what you're seeing right here gets you a good number of points, including a couple of the extra features down towards the bottom, like the ability to see your text here on screen, the ability for back once. Those are extra features, and I'm giving them to you for free for those of you who go through and actually see these videos. So, you know, good job actually doing the work. Thank you. So at this point, I would want to verify this project. Now, if you're looking at the documentation, this is roughly the step 4, where you go through and you verify that your project is actually correct. Now, all that code would do is, or rather, all that video would do is go through and have you export all your content, create a new project, import that content in, and then play test it. Make sure that everything was good. So with nothing selected up here in my hierarchy, nothing selected here in my project window, but if I had to select something, let's say for example, this was like a really long list of things, and for whatever reason I was forced to select something. In this mode, one column layout, I'm not forced to. I can actually press Control and deselect or select things as I so choose. But if I'm in 2-column mode, Unity forces me to have something selected over here. I can't control click on things to deselect things. It always has at least one thing selected. So in this case, if you are forced to have something selected, you've got a couple of options. One, you can either switch back to 1-column mode and then deselect stuff, or, and this will work in either of those two windows, just select assets at the very top. They're in 1 column and here in 2 column, right there at the top. That way, when you go to export, it filters nothing. It sees all of your files, all of your folders, because you can go through and look at every one of these locations. There are my 2 C# files, there's my scene, this folder contains those 2 folders, this is the root of the entire project, and from here you can just go up and say Assets, Export, and looking at the information presented here, there's the root folder, there's the scenes, there's my current scene, the .unity, there's the scripts, there's my page and my core file, my 2 CS files. And if you have this extra stuff, just go ahead and disable it. We don't need that. That's if you have extra things installed. If I see it on my end, I'll just turn it off anyway. There's no reason for me to import it. But if you have it, you can just turn it off there. And then when you export, name it the same thing we just named all this other stuff. So last name, first name, so Reynolds Tony underscore week 2 project. And I would prefer you not export it into your current project. That can clutter stuff up really badly. I would highly recommend that you just dump it to something like your desktop. Makes life a lot easier, because then if you try to regenerate that file, you don't have to try to hunt it down over here in your project and delete it. It's sitting right there on your desktop. So you can delete it over there or override it or whatever. It just makes organization a bit easier. So then you can save, and when you finish the save, when it finishes the save, you'll get an Explorer window with that asset. Again, this is all review for stuff that's in that step 4 video, so please go double check that, because there's more steps in terms of verifying this build, as well as zipping it up and sending it to FSO, which I won't cover here because it's already covered there. So with that concludes all the code necessary to build this entire project. Now, all you need to do is go through, take a look at the information that's on FSO, look at the instructions, look at the rubric, look at the 2 files that we provide to you, the 2 stories, the Curiouser and Curiouser and the Desert Escape. Pick one of those 2, take a look at the flowchart, take a look at the narrative for each of those 2 stories, and pick one. Pick either Desert Escape and swap out the arrows based on the input, the handle input stuff here, and swap out these individual narrative pieces down here at the bottom based on what you see in the narrative document that we provide as well. Then go through, play test, and do an export and try to get some of those extra features. And that is essentially all that you need to do for this project. As long as you have your one scene that has a game object, that's got the script attached, the UI, the text, as well as your page C# file here, your core file here renamed to your last name, first name, and then underscore week 2, and then basically all the rest of the code that you're seeing in here, essentially mimic it. So if either of those 2 stories start out with a different heading here, you might have to update this to match whatever that starting value is. And if you do, you might also have to come back over here to this game object, and if it's a different value here, you can either type it in manually, or if you've changed it in code, you could click this gear and say reset, and it will remap itself to whatever was updated inside your code. This is going back to the week 1 stuff when I talked about serialized field and how certain values supersede other values. So just keep that kind of stuff in mind. If it's not behaving, double check your values, double check your spelling, double check your capitalization, and double check the stuff you're seeing or not seeing over in the inspector as well as in the console. But with that concludes this entire project. The farmhouse that you see here is a template. Please do not submit it. Please go through and swap out the contents inside bind book and handle input for either of the 2 stories, whichever one you decide to pick. And that is essentially it. If you run into any issues, you have any kind of questions, comments, concerns, please reach out to your instructor. We are here to help.